Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of the Players NIL podcast. And my guest today, Mr. Cal Stein. Cal, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, we appreciate your time and trying to share a little bit of knowledge and wisdom from the legal front today. And we'll talk about the state of NIL, state of college collectives, the NCAA guidance. We'll get into some of those important topics that I think our audience would like to hear. But we start every podcast with the same question, and it's really important to me because at the Players NIL, our mission is to use athletics to better the lives of the people around us. And we say that you can do it through art, you can do it through science, travel, food, fashion. We happen to be sports people, we happen to be athletes. And so we're using athletics to try and change people's lives. But let's go back, give us a little background. I use two words. One is sports, the other is athletics. Sports is the fandom part. You know, the first game you went to, your hero, you held your dad's hand or your grandfather's hand and went to a game. And then athletics would be, if you did, and I don't know the answer to this question, participate at all. But maybe more importantly, why you're so connected to athletics and why it's important to you. So let's ask the first question. That is, tell me a little bit about your sports fandom history.
Well, I've been a sports fan since I was a little kid. Growing up in Boston, as you can imagine, we are very, very connected to our sports teams here. I remember the days of before the Patriots were any good. And being able to grow with that team in particular has been very, very rewarding for me. But of course, the Red Sox growing up in town, I grew up just a couple miles from Fenway Park. As you mentioned, remember going to my first game with my dad there, sitting in the old Boston Garden with the Boston Bruins. My father had a great friend who used to give us some tickets, first row balcony in the old garden, could almost reach out and touch the players. So as a kid and continuing since then, my fandom has been important to me. I was a Bruins season ticket holder for many years, including when they won the Stanley Cup. I was in the building for those times. So it's always been important to me, fandom.
It's funny, I talk to people and they laugh, but today's generation of Bostonians, they don't know anything but winning. They don't remember the Patriots or before the Red Sox won. Maybe the Celtics have always been good. The Bruins have had some good years and some down years, but they think everybody wins in Boston all the time. So that's awesome. It is.
We don't win all of them, just most of them. But I had to suffer through the Aaron Boone game as a Red Sox fan when I was in college, including having multiple roommates from the Bronx. So that was not a pleasant night for me.
Well, I tell people I'm from Long Island originally, and I'm of the generation when it was Mets, Jets, Nets. And if I bring up the name Mookie Wilson, or Bill Buckner, you don't want to really talk about that, right? So, great sports town, obviously, incredible city, unbelievable tradition. So you're a sports fan. Did you participate in athletics? Were you a high school athlete? Did you participate at any higher level?
Yeah, no, I sure did. And, in many ways, as much of a sportsman as I am, athletics has meant more to me as a person and shaping the person I've become. I've always played sports. It's always been important to me, particularly team sports. That was something that always resonated with me and something I always really loved. Team sports shaped my youth throughout high school. I played, football and baseball in high school. My best friends were my teammates. They're all still my best friends. The best teachers I ever had were my coaches, some of whom I'm still in touch with. Learned a lot more about success and failure playing sports than really anywhere else, and about, overcoming adversity. I had, a bad injury in high school that I had to overcome. And, you learn what's in your control. You learn what's not in control. And you do what you can. But athletics actually, continued to shape my adult life, even after I finished playing in high school. When I was in law school, I went back to my high school and coached both baseball and football, which was some of the most fun I ever had. I'm still close with the guys I coached with, still close with some of my players. In fact, one of them is a lawyer in town now, and we see each other all the time. I wish I could go back and do more of that. But more than anything, I would say my athletic career has shaped my career as a lawyer. That's the reason I went into the law. I loved being on teams. I loved competing. And becoming a lawyer and a litigator is really, I think, the closest I was able to come to approximating what it's like to be on a sports team in my adult life. So I'm very thankful for that, and still feeling it to this day.
That's a great story, and we have, been fortunate enough, both of us and many of us, to use athletics to better our lives, which is what my father taught me, and it sounds like you've done the same thing. So, great experience as a fan in Boston, great experience as a participant, as a coach. Good for you for giving back to your community. I'm sure those kids got great mentorship and leadership besides the X's and O's from someone like you. So now you've got, a law degree, you've got a career, name, image, and likeness, NIL. It's been around for a long time, but it only was legitimized in July of 2021. Tell us a little bit about your work and your connection to name, image, and likeness.
Sure. So, I've been a lawyer for a lot longer than name, image, and likeness has really been a thing, or at least a thing above the table, as you mentioned. But as an attorney, I'm a litigator by practice, but I do a lot of investigation work, internal investigation, and compliance counseling. And throughout my entire career, I've done it with universities, usually large state schools with academic medical centers. And I've always been a big sports fan, as we talked about. I've always been a huge college football fan. So when NIL came to the forefront a couple of years ago, it was a great opportunity for me to kind of meld my legal practice of advising these schools, colleges, and universities with my real interest in being able to work on the athletic side of things with NIL. And since it came out, there's not been much guidance. Everyone is doing their best to make sense of all the things that are happening. But we've had great success, and I personally have had great success working with schools, counseling them, advising them, working with them on their compliance programs and trying to answer their questions about what they and their athletes can and oftentimes can't do. So that's really what we've been focused on so far.
Let's go back to July 1st, 2021, when all of the genie was let out of the bottle, as they say. I understand the O'Banion case and lots of other case law that led up to this, but in your opinion, why did it take so long, and why was 2021 the time? What kicked it over the top, do you think?
Well, the reason it took so long is because I almost call it legal inertia. It had been a certain way for so long that to change course took a lot of time. And what it really took, as so many things do, it took the right case and the right plaintiff and the right political environment and the right Supreme Court at the right time, all of those things coming together to really have this movement take off. And those things all did come together at that time. And, it's something that I think anyone who followed it knew was likely to come. There had been some unsuccessful attempts early, prior to it. There had been some athletes at schools that had tried to unionize and things like that. So there were definitely rumblings and definitely ripples forming in the water, but it took a confluence of all of those things to happen at the right time for the decision to come out and change things and change the landscape in the dramatic way that it has.
Yeah, I guess it's just it was timing. So I look at name, image, and likeness today. We're in the beginning of 2023, and I see buckets of participants. So let's just go through a couple of these buckets and give me your current status on where you think we are as an industry and where these people's pressure points are. Okay, so the first one, and we'll try and not bore everyone with all the case law history and the debates going on, but where are we currently with the NCAA and name, image, and likeness? What's the status report beginning of 2023?
Yeah, so the NCAA has issued a handful of guidance documents, and that's really all they've done is issue guidance documents. They have stated and kind of, I guess the word I would use is complained a little bit, that they want Congress to step in, and by Congress, I mean the US Congress to step in and put some uniform federal rules in place. That obviously hasn't happened yet. Doesn't look all that likely to happen anytime soon. So, in light of the decision, the Supreme Court decision that we've been talking about, really what the NCAA did was they stepped in and said, look, as long as these NIL deals and these NIL money and opportunities are not being used as an inducement, and that's the key word in this entire thing, as long as they're not being used as an inducement, these players are not going to lose their eligibility over it. And that's really what the NCAA can do on the player side of things is speak to eligibility. They have more things that they can do on the enforcement side with the schools. And the NCAA has indicated, look, if there are compliance violations on these NIL related to NIL, we're going to come after the schools. We're not going to come after the players. But really, the NCAA has not done what you might expect, which is to kind of come out with this comprehensive set of rules for NIL. They've taken a more of a laissez-faire approach and just said, this is happening. As long as you're not using it for an inducement, no one's going to lose their eligibility over it.
Great. The second bucket is the academic institutions. So whether it's Division 3, 2, 1, Power 5, mid-major, as a general concept, where are colleges and universities at with NIL today? One is, what do they think about it? 2, what are they afraid of? 3, what are they doing to try and relieve those pressure points?
Yeah. So what do they think of it? I don't want to speak for all universities, but I think most of them outwardly are very happy about it. They want to see their athletes being able to do these things and benefit from being able to go out and compete and things like that. I think that's a real benefit for them. And some schools have really been able to turn NIL into a boon for their athletic programs. Certainly, there are others who enjoyed things the way they were. And, a cynic might look at things and say these universities that for many, 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 many years enjoyed the lucrative opportunities of not having to pay their players and their labor, probably would have been happy with the status quo. Maybe not. But I think, on the whole, the universities are at least happy for their student athletes. Now, what they need to do about it, that's really where things have gotten a little tricky because, as we just said, the NCAA hasn't come out with comprehensive guidance. U.S. Congress hasn't given us anything. We've got, a handful of guidance documents from the NCAA, and then we've got individual state legislatures that are stepping in and passing state by state laws, which those are in many ways the most important ones for these universities to follow because those can be enforced by state attorneys generals, and I suspect one day they will be enforced by those offices. But it's a brave new world, and I think most universities are doing the best they can to put in place a compliance program, to work with people like me, to get that compliance program in place and to structure, whatever operations and whatever deals they have in a way that is most likely to be deemed compliant by either the state AG or the NCAA. And I say most likely because we haven't really seen any enforcement yet. So it's hard to predict what are the pressure points really going to be.
Great answer. Next pot of interested victims, the student athletes themselves. What are the potholes that they're trying to navigate around, or what should they be careful of if they're an NIL student athlete?
So, the student athletes, it's great for them, right? It's great for them, especially the ones who are really able to capitalize. And quite frankly, everyone should, I think, be happy for them that they're able to use their abilities and use their name and image and likeness to earn some money. So that is all great. But of course, with that comes lots and lots of pitfalls and things that can be problematic for anyone, let alone, a 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid. So, in terms of what they ought to be looking out for, I mean, anytime anyone is throwing a lot of money at you, there are any number of different things that can really go wrong. I mean, these NIL deals with the real money attached to them involve real contractual relationships and contracts. And, when you have a contract with another party, there are real obligations that you have to comply with under that contract, or else face the consequences. You and I were talking before about the tax consequences for these individuals. Many of them probably have never had to file taxes before. And all of a sudden they've got a lot of income. Are taxes being taken out of it? Are they not? And then, there's the whole compliance and anti-inducement piece of it as well. These athletes, they want to get their money. They want to be able to engage in these NIL activities, but they don't want their team to suffer as a result of it because of something they did. So my sense, and from what I've seen in practicing in the industry, is they are really craving guidance and craving help from the schools. I preach constantly with the schools, cooperation, open line of communication between you, your athletes. That's going to be the best way to harmonize some of these things, because there are a lot of different competing factors pushing and pulling everyone.
Yeah, it's complicated and it changes every day, right? I get up in the morning and I read all my news sources. It takes me quite a while to get through all the news of the day regarding NIL. So my opinion is, that we didn't see this confluence of transfer portal meets collective, right? This is something that I'm not sure a lot of people really saw happening. The Deion Sanders of the world, he seems to be doing pretty well with it. But tell me about collectives. Last pot of interested victims is, what I call the booster club on steroids. What should they be careful of? What's their future look like?
So the collectives are really, to me, the most interesting piece of this, right? Because you would think that the NCAA would come out and say, "Ooh, no, we don't want them involved in NIL." Not the case. They've come out and said, "No, it's fine. They can be involved. Here's what they have to do. You can't, be involved in recruiting activities. It can't be used as an inducement." Okay, that's fine. These collectives are comprised of people with lots and lots of money. Their money is exceeded only in many cases by their fanaticism and love for the team, often a basketball or football team from the school they went to. You look at all of those factors, and it's pretty easy to see that, when enforcement actions come and when a school is ultimately punished for violating these NIL rules, it's more than likely going to be as the result of some overzealous collective, which, did something. Maybe they intended, maybe they didn't, maybe they had good intentions, but did something non-compliant and ultimately used this as an improper inducement. And to me, it's not a matter of whether, but when. It's just a matter of time before one of these collectives, it embroils itself in that type of situation. And I'm sure they'll feel bad when they do. And that's one of the reasons that in my discussions with collectives and universities and people acting on behalf of collectives, once again, we urge the collectives, look, you've got plenty of money to pay all these players. Find someone who knows the rules and engage them to help advise you on how to do this within the rules so that you don't inadvertently hurt the school or the program that you love so much.
It's going to be fascinating. We know what goes on, wink, wink, nod, nod, with collectives and with recruiting inducements and transfer portal inducements and all that type. We could probably talk about this for hours, Cal, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So last part of this is the advice part. You've given us some great advice about the pitfalls and the potholes along this NIL journey. But if I'm a student athlete, which is what we're focused on, the players NIL cares about athletes. Okay, God bless the collectives and the schools, the NCAA. Yeah. I'm more worried about the high school kids, the parents, the recruiting process, and the influence that money has over that. So give me a couple of sound bites on, what should student athletes look for going forward, and what can they do to best position themselves to take advantage of name, image, and likeness?
Yeah, so number one for student athletes is be careful. be careful. I mean, NIL is great. It's great for student athletes. There's no question about that. But it is still very new. There's very little regulation. The regulation that does exist is not consistent across states. And there's even less experience really for all of these different stakeholders to fall back on. Everyone's moving quickly. Everyone's trying to do, what they think is right or what's in their best interest. No one really knows how any of this is going to turn out. And at the end of the day, the only people who are really looking out for the students are the students and the student athletes themselves and their families, things like that. But my number one piece of advice would be careful when you go into these arrangements. Try to go in with eyes wide open and make sure you've got people who are advising you as best you can. The number two thing I would say is be cooperative. We've talked about that a little bit today. Be careful, but also be cooperative. NIL should work for both the student athlete and the school. That's what everyone had in mind when this started. And the schools really need cooperation. They crave cooperation from the athletes and from the collectives. The schools are the ones with the compliance obligations. The schools are the ones who are going to be punished. But yeah, things will go smoother for everyone if the schools can have some visibility into what is happening with these NIL arrangements. And as we talked about before, really the last thing these athletes want to do is inadvertently cause an enforcement action and hurt their school, their team, their coaches. We talked about that at the beginning. Those are some of their, those were my best friends growing up and my best friends now. It's the last thing I'd want to do. And then the last thing I would say, to student athletes, in addition to be careful, be cooperative, but number three, enjoy it. This is a good time to be a student athlete. Enjoy playing your sports, enjoy your teammates, enjoy your coaches, enjoy the NIL opportunities that are coming your way that many people didn't have before you. It's a great time to be a student athlete, and things are going to change. We all know the cycles that things can go in, and we're in a good one right now. So enjoy it.
CCE, careful, cautious, and enjoy. That's going to be
There you go.
my three letters to take away. So great advice, and I appreciate that. So Cal, I want to say thank you. This has been very enjoyable to get your perspective, as a knowledgeable attorney, first of all, NIL fan, second of all, and a businessman in this space. We certainly want to get you back on at some point in the future if we have any of our first case guidance issues. But I want to say thank you, and the Players NIL really appreciates you coming on and sharing your knowledge.
Well, thank you for having me, Mark. I'm going to take you up on that. I'd love to come back and talk after we have our first enforcement action.
Okay.